This is the border town of Mae Sot. It's a place the Burmese run to when trouble comes, as it has so often. I've come here to meet some of the leaders of September's uprising. They've escaped across the border to Thailand, joining tens of thousands of families who've already been forced into exile. Inside Burma, a spasm of popular fury against the military regime was crushed without mercy. I've been brought to a safe house to meet a man who's still in hiding.
Sawadee Krap. Sawadee Krap. Nice to meet you too.
Ashin Kavida is a Buddhist monk and a key figure in the protests.
Okay, good.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you for coming.
What day?
Video footage, smuggled out of Burma, shows him and his colleagues on the front lines in Rangoon, defying the military crackdown.
We don't have democracy. Our country doesn't have democracy. I want people to be free. I want them to have human rights.
This is the inside story of Burma's unfinished uprising, told by 6 remarkable men who helped to shape it. Today, Burma's capital, Rangoon, is a city of poverty and decay. Years of mismanagement have wrecked a once wealthy country. A third of young children here are now stunted by hunger. This August, the ruling generals added to the misery by raising fuel prices without warning. It was a crippling blow, and it triggered something almost unheard of in Burma: protest. Foreign journalists are barred here. I came to Rangoon undercover as the first demonstrations were beginning.
Things are very, very tense here right now. There's a massive security crackdown underway. The authorities determined to stamp out these protests before they get out of hand.
And stamp them out they did. Plainclothes police and hired thugs pounced on each small gathering, attacking and arresting those involved. Order and fear were restored. I left soon afterwards. Burma's generals have a long track record of crushing all dissent. Their jails are packed with political prisoners. They killed more than 3,000 people to put down the last uprising in 1988. Since then, Burma's democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has spent most of her time under house arrest. But the generals have a weak spot: Burma's Buddhist clergy. There are as many monks as soldiers in this profoundly devout country. The revered monks can wield huge influence if they choose to. Suddenly, they began issuing demands calling for the government to cut fuel prices and release political prisoners. The young monks gathered at the Shwedagon Pagoda in Rangoon, Burma's holiest temple and its most famous political stage. On September the 18th, the first small procession of monks took to the streets of Rangoon. Their peaceful chants were a direct challenge to the regime. At this early stage, a young monk, Ashin Kavida, had already emerged as one of the main organisers, mobilising individual monasteries, urging them to make a stand against the military.
The government said we were imposters and not real monks. We decided to show them that we were real monks, not fake ones. We planned to march in public wearing our robes. We demonstrated in a precise order, with 5 monks in each row.
I went to meet the monks on the 17th of September. They had announced that they would demonstrate if the government did not respond to their demands. We decided that the Monks' Alliance would march on the 18th of September. When the march started, I walked at the front as a marshal. That was my job.
Each day, we went from our monasteries to the Shwedagon Pagoda. We set up meeting points at the Shwedagon for all the monks coming from different monasteries. The monks at the front held up the holy banner, and the other monks lined up behind them. Each day we marched around the pagodas in town, and then at about 5 in the evening we returned to our monasteries.
We were just peacefully demonstrating, asking the rulers to reduce the prices. We were not asking them to step down. We were just demanding that they alleviate the pain of the people.
For a while, the authorities seemed almost paralyzed, uncertain how to handle the monks' gentle defiance. There were even some hints that the military might be starting to split.
On the 19th of September, we heard that the army was given orders to shoot. We prepared for the worst, but Division 77 refused to obey the orders. They secured the roads, but nothing else. We even saw some soldiers clapping, and others gave supporting gestures.
Even more remarkably, the monks were allowed to pay a brief visit to Aung San Suu Kyi herself, walking right up to the gates of her prison home. At this stage, the monks were marching more or less on their own. That was how they wanted it. But their courage was contagious. Soon others began to join, emboldened by the regime's unusual restraint.
All of the people, including children, women, government servants, teachers, students, all participate and also their desire peacefully, and we are very successful. At that time, the authorities fears the people because all of the people are following the Buddhist monks.
As word spread, the crowds got bigger. Thousands now poured onto Rangoon's streets. This was no longer just a monks' protest. It was becoming a popular uprising spreading across the whole country. The internet used to smuggle images to the outside world. Burma's political opposition now joined the marchers, a move guaranteed to infuriate the generals. State television tried to blame foreign agitators and fake monks. Senior clergy were paraded on screen to condemn the protests. Government workers were warned to stay off the streets. The threats grew steadily stronger.
They try to make the civil servants and the army hate the people, but we're all born the same. When the people suffer economic hardship, we also suffer. The demonstration started because of the economic problems, so I had to join in.
The crowds clustered round the monks, to guard them and perhaps to protect themselves. Surely the soldiers would not attack such revered figures.
I'm very proud to have taken part in these demonstrations. In Burma, men and women never touch or even hold a stranger's hand. But during these demonstrations, men and women were holding hands. We weren't strangers, we were like brothers and sisters.
Although the security forces allowed the marchers to continue, they were filming the crowds, and out of sight, the police were busy raiding the homes of protest leaders.
If the government ruled the people with a good heart and in a fair way, our country and its people wouldn't be so poor. There would be no disagreement between the political parties and reconciliation would occur. We were chanting to bring change to our country.
In our hearts, we had hope. Now that all of the monks and people had joined together, we were hopeful that some of our demands would be met.
Then came the day it all changed. A deceptive calm in the morning. But by lunchtime the city was again clogged with huge crowds, and now battle-hardened soldiers had been brought in. It was an ominous sign. As the monks moved through the streets, they found troops had blocked their way. The general's patience had run out.
We were really brave to come out on the 26th. They had been given orders to shoot us. The monks were also determined to give their lives and administered final rites services to those who had not already received it.
When the troops arrived, we weren't scared and we stood still. Some of the monks tried to persuade the officers to let us pass, but they refused. The monks were down on their knees when the riot police attacked and seriously beat 3 of them. They fired into the air 3 times and then shot a firebomb at us. They fired lots of tear gas. People couldn't see because of all the smoke.
They attacked the monks so violently that they fell down, and they beat the older monks as well. They stamped on them with their boots and dragged them to the trucks. They also broke our flag, and when the crowd saw this, they surged forward. Then they shot more tear gas and firebombs into the crowd to control us.
We ran for our lives and scrambled over the wall. They were still firing tear gas and shooting at all of the monks. They hit us with batons. As we were climbing over the wall, they were pulling us down and hitting us. I was hit in the stomach, and there were a lot of monks who were hit on the head.
The soldiers only dared to hit us because they'd been told that we were fake monks. They were very violent towards the monks and were arresting anyone they could get their hands on. As they led them to the trucks, they kicked and shoved them. When the truck was full, they drove off quickly. They attacked anyone they saw with tear gas. It was unbearable. I didn't expect them to react like that.
I saw 100 to 180 people lying on the ground. I don't know how many of these were dead and how many were injured. There was smoke everywhere. We'd made a decision not to fight back, so we just let them hit us. I was hit on my back and the monks threw stones at them. As I was running away, I was hit again. It was very painful.
In a Buddhist country, it was a shocking sight to see monks, the Buddha's sons, being brutally attacked in this way. People were already very angry with the military government. Now these incidents made them more and more bitter towards them.
The violence against the monks provoked international outrage, but calls for restraint were ignored.
I went to a monastery nearby, and when I got there, a few of the monks were vomiting blood.
He was smashed by the police.
The doctors hadn't arrived yet. Some of the monks had injuries, and they were groaning in pain. They were bleeding so much that they used their robes to wrap up their injuries. Blood was oozing from their wounds.
People came with cars to help the injured. I looked around and saw at least 30 to 40 monks lying on the ground.
About 1,500 to 2,000 monks were arrested, and up to 200 monks were injured.
And we very sorry and also we dislike on their brutal behavior.
Aung San Suu Kyi said that if we want democracy, we must be disciplined and not retaliate. I tried to stop them with my tears, and I'm shattered. It wasn't only monks that were killed, others also died there.
After dark, and with a curfew in place, the security forces targeted the monasteries. The authorities sealed the monasteries off. With thousands of monks injured, arrested or dead, their role in the uprising was almost over.
Buddhism is a very peaceful religion. We monks are the leaders of the Buddhist faith. When the monks are being crushed under the boots of soldiers and have to hide and flee, you can imagine what life is like for ordinary people in Burma.
On the 27th, crowds gathered again, but only a handful of monks were there on the sidelines. Now Burma's student activists took the lead. Desperate to keep the momentum going, they gathered at Sulay Pagoda in the heart of Rangoon.
By the 27th, we knew the revolution had already begun. I told everyone, all my friends and colleagues, to get more people to come and demonstrate. We knew that if we lost this battle, we would be brutally crushed. We all gathered together in one place to demonstrate. When the soldiers and police came to break us up, we moved on to the next location and held more protests there.
The demonstrations were started by the monks, and those who were brave enough joined us. Not everyone dared to participate, so they supported us in any way they could, even by applauding.
The student leadership was unexpected and very admirable. They began their march at the university, and there were about 50,000 of them. The government didn't know where to follow them to or how to block them off. Our route changed, and some of them got through the roadblocks and reached the Sulay Pagoda.
The troops had been brutal with the monks. Now they were even more ferocious. A Japanese journalist, Kenji Nagai, was shot at point-blank range. Hundreds of protesters were injured or killed. The world was watching. The regime moved to shut down phone lines and the internet, but too late. These images caused outrage abroad, but they would also prove useful to Burma's security forces, enabling them to track down those involved. The military was now firmly in control of Rangoon. For a while, small groups tried to mount hit-and-run style protests, but the old fear was returning to the streets.
I make many protests as a normal protester in the quick strikes in the downtown Yangon. Then the police troop reach immediately and they start to beat. And then we ran. We must be arrested. We have faced very, very dangerous position.
Burma's generals brushed off international criticism, confident that allies like China would not abandon them. They felt safe enough now to allow the United Nations envoy Ibrahim Gambari to visit.
When Gambari arrived in Burma during the September uprisings, he had no idea how many people had been killed, how many people had been injured, or what problems they were facing in hospital. He didn't even know how many people had been arrested. He wrote his report for the Secretary General, but he didn't try to see anything for himself.
There was now a superficial calm on the streets, but the crackdown was not over. The prisons were already overflowing, and thousands of protesters were still on the run.
Hiding away was physically and mentally stressful. It was worse at night time when they made their arrests. I didn't know where to hide or what I should do. I was very worried, and it was very stressful.
After the uprisings, I was sleeping rough and I couldn't go home. I stayed with some friends for a few days, and during that time I heard that monks and protesters were being arrested. The security forces were looking everywhere for anyone who took part in the protests. Some of the people I knew were taken away. Then I decided I did not want to suffer torture in interrogation centres or labour camps. I could not waste my life there.
It was very difficult for me to continue. On the 27th, they tried to find me using my photo. I had to go into hiding. Then my mother came and took me with her.
That evening, the security forces used loud hailers to threaten and intimidate.
At night, they make searching for the protesters everywhere. They announce to the public not to accept the protester. Do inform where the protester is. And so the condition is very, very dangerous condition. And they want, if anyone accepts the stranger, all of his family will be arrested.
Those activists who were still free now had to make a difficult choice: to stay on the run inside Burma or to attempt the dangerous journey to neighbouring Thailand. Ashin Kavida said goodbye to his mother.
I came from Rangoon to Maiwadi by car, but I was not in my robes. There were checkpoints on the way, so I changed into civilian clothes and went into hiding. As a monk, you still remain a monk, even if you have to get rid of your robes, so long as you still keep your beliefs and behavior. I was very lucky to get here.
Ashin Kavida crossed the river and entered Thailand on the 18th of October. The other young monk from Rangoon had a narrow escape across the same bridge. Even outside Burma, he's still too scared to reveal his identity.
They seemed to have my photo at the border gate. They looked at me and checked their photo. They asked my name, where I came from, and where I was going. After that, they let me go.
Those who fled have carried with them the belief that Burma's latest uprising is not over, that the sacrifices of the last months have not been wasted.
When an ordinary citizen like me becomes interested in politics, The junta's oppression is no longer just oppression. They are training us to become politicians ourselves. Someone who once just cared about their own problems has now changed their direction.
One thing I dare see is Burma must be a country which booming with democracy and human rights in the future. Because we have already determined to stop the dictatorship in Burma. We must win.
In Mae Sot, the exiles cling to that belief. But Burma's regime shows no signs of buckling under pressure. America may be imposing new sanctions, but China is scrambling to sign new trade deals. Ashin Kavida now finds himself being accused in Burmese government newspapers of stockpiling high explosives for use against the state. He denies the charges, but there's no way back for him now.
If I go back, they'll arrest me. They've already killed some of the monks' leaders. They beat and killed them. Some of them died in prison because of all the torture. If I'm arrested, I will get 20 to 30 years in prison. And that's if I'm lucky. They might not imprison me. They could just as easily kill me. I just don't know what would happen. There are very few monks left in the monasteries. I want to know where they all are. Are they in prison? Where are they? Some have been killed and some have just disappeared. They could have finished all of them off and nobody would even know. I'm very worried that they've done the same thing to my mother.
Today, the regime insists it's released most of those detained. But activists believe thousands are still being held. In exile, U Pa Cha waits for news from inside Burma. Like his country, he's stranded between hope and despair.
I have never felt so devastated, even when my parents died. I can't express my feelings about leaving Burma. I was a dead man there, and I had nothing to lose, so I risked everything to escape. I left full of sadness. I have never felt like this before, and I will never forget this feeling for the rest of my life.